Hello, my Bill 5000 Nation. How's everyone doing today? Hopefully, everyone's having a great day. If not, I hope it gets better from here. We are back with a new MrBallen video. This one is titled "The Missing Hiker Case Takes the Most Unimaginable Hollywood Turn I've Ever Seen." Now, I know a couple of videos didn't come out last week, Thursdays, Fridays. Internet was out. I'm in the process of trying to get a new internet provider because this is not the first time it's happened, and it's been happening quite often anymore. And I actually have to call. They don't just can't just reset it from wherever the hell they're at anymore. They actually got to come out, do something with the box. It's like the second time I've had to get a new box for it. So, in the market for new internet. And that's all I'll say on the matter. Deep breaths. Woosah. But there's not really a whole lot of internet providers in the area I live in either. Unfortunately. Which does kind of blow. They should do something about that. Oh well. All that aside, I'm ready to get in today's video. Hopefully you guys are as ready as I am. If you are, please go ahead. Turn them lights down low. Put on something comfy, couple something special. Let's get highly concerned. Yeah.
Today, I'm going to tell you 3 stories about real people who had something totally unexpected and insane happen to them, think like stranger than fiction, that kind of thing, that not only changed their lives, but also in some of these cases, changed the lives of millions of other people too.
Oh shit.
Now, these stories are kind of a slight departure from what is considered normal on this channel. They're not that far off, but they're a little different. So if you like them, let us know in the comments and we will do more of them. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please put glitter in the like button's car vents so when they turn on their AC, it gets blown all over the inside of their car.
No.
Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you
mean.
don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories.
Goes everywhere. It's some grody shit, man. It goes everywhere. Don't do that. Ugh. It's worse than sand.
On the afternoon of July 9th, 2001, a 13-year-old boy named Cody Clausen carried a bag of camping supplies through the woods near Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. Cody had come to the woods for a camping trip with his dad and his Boy Scout troop. But about 30 minutes earlier, he had broken off from the main group, they were over at camp, and he had hiked a couple of miles to his dad's truck to pick up some extra camping supplies. And now that he had those supplies, he had turned around and begun hiking back towards the rest of the group. As Cody hiked along, he kind of let his mind wander. He was thinking about what story he was going to tell that night around the campfire to impress the other Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
But as he was thinking about it and kind of walking along, he started to realize that things didn't look familiar. And at some point, he started to wonder, like, why haven't I actually reached the campsite yet? And at that point, he stopped, he didn't panic, and he just kind of looked around and realized that he actually had left the path. He was not even in an area that he had seen before.
Oh,
and so
shit.
being a Boy Scout, he kind of stayed calm and he just turned around and decided he would retrace his steps back to his dad's truck and start again. He would obviously be very late back to camp, but at least he'd come back in one piece. But as he retraced his steps, he really didn't know where he had come from, because again, he had sort of left the trail because his mind was wandering. And so before long, Cody realized he was totally lost.
Oh,
and he started to
shit.
panic. Hours passed by as Cody frantically walked around the woods, calling out for help, but not hearing anybody calling back to him. And then as the sun began to set, he also noticed that storm clouds were rolling in. And so this situation was becoming dire very quickly. But he told himself, you know, don't worry, my father and the Boy Scout troop, they clearly know by this point that I'm missing and they must be out looking for me. But Cody knew there was no telling how long it would take for them to find him. I mean, it could be hours or it could be days. Or, the thought was totally terrifying, but they might not find him at all. But at this point, Cody was able to calm himself down and tell himself like, hey, you're a Boy Scout, you can do this. You can at least stay out here, you know, make a shelter, build a fire, and kind of just wait while someone comes to find you. That's all you can do at this point. And so he had his bag of supplies with him.
Boy
And so
Scout.
he took it off and he dumped the contents out. And quickly he realized the contents of this bag were not going to help him. Certainly not going to help him build a fire or shelter. But worse than that was there also wasn't any food, and he barely had any water. So effectively, he had nothing. And then, of course, to make matters even worse, the sky suddenly let loose, and Cody was caught in a major thunderstorm. And so Cody rounded up whatever he could, threw it in his bag, and just started running in the dark through the trees as hail is pelting him and it's thunder and lightning, and he's got no idea what he's gonna do. And then suddenly lightning flashes across the sky, and for a second the forest is illuminated, and right up ahead of him is this cave. And so Cody runs into the cave and he takes shelter inside of it. It's pouring rain outside.
What else is taking shelter inside this cave, MrBallen? Look, I've watched enough of your videos, sir. I know there's something going on inside this cave, or it would not be a MrBallen video. Right? I'm right. Yeah, but we know I'm right.
It's so loud, it's so chaotic, and he's terrified. But now it's like his body just shuts down. He's so overwhelmed, he's so scared as he's laying there like wondering, am I gonna die out here? That he just closes his eyes and passes out just from sheer exhaustion. The next morning, Cody woke up still sheltering inside of this cave. And the first thing he noticed is when he looked out into the woods was the storm had stopped, the rain had let up. And then the second thing he noticed was he heard the distinct sound of a helicopter flying somewhere nearby. Cody instantly ran out of the cave and looked up into the sky, and sure enough, there was this small helicopter flying around roughly in his area. And so using some of his Boy Scout training, he pulled off his belt and he used the metal buckle of his belt to reflect the sunlight back up at the pilot to get the pilot's attention. And it worked. He got the pilot clearly to notice him, and before long, he noticed the pilot hovering down lower and lower right over the tree line, looking for a place to land. And so Cody is so overjoyed, he's about to be saved.
Hell
He
yeah.
grabs his stuff and just charges over roughly to the area where the pilot's trying to land, and by the time he gets in that vicinity, he sees the pilot actually touching down in a clearing. Cody can't believe it. It's only been one day and he's been found. And so Cody runs over to the helicopter, throws the door open, gets inside, and the pilot just turns around and says, "Good morning." And Cody, at first, doesn't really register what's happening here. He's only just completely relieved that he is going to survive. But then he kind of stops and looks at the pilot, and he can't believe who it is that's just rescued him. It would turn out the night before, when Cody did not return to the camp, his father and the Boy Scout troop did contact authorities, and before long, a local search party was organized. And one of those people who volunteered to be a part of the search was an amateur pilot who lived in the area. That helicopter pilot was the one who found Cody 10 miles away from his Boy Scout troop's camp. When that pilot reunited Cody with his father,
he was really daydreaming, wasn't he? 10 miles, Jesus.
Cody's father naturally assumed that, given the trauma of the last 24 hours, that Cody would not want to rejoin the Boy Scout troop and continue this camping trip, that he would want to go home. But instead, Cody said, no, I want to go back to the Boy Scout troop. I want to sit there and tell them what happened to me, because now I have a campfire story that they are not gonna believe. Cody had trekked 10 miles through the wilderness all alone, spent the night with bears out in a cave somewhere in the middle of a storm, and then ultimately got rescued by this amateur helicopter pilot who happened to be, at the time, one of the most famous people in the world. The amateur pilot was the actor who had played Han Solo in Star Wars. He was Indiana Jones and had starred in several other major blockbuster movies. It was none other than Harrison Ford.
Fucking A-Ride, doggy. Yeah.
You know that feeling when you just get totally immersed and lost inside of a story from...
Bro, I don't care. We just heard about Harrison Ford rescuing a kid in a helicopter. Man, that kid's life is made. He's got a story forever. Damn.
Start to finish. Well, that's exactly what Audible brings right to you. Whether you're stuck in traffic or hitting the gym or winding down after a long day, Audible always has a story that will bring you right in. Thrillers, fantasies, true crime, you name it, it's all there on Audible, all just the click of a play button away. So go unleash your adventurous side with Audible's vast library of entertainment. Sink into gripping titles that'll keep you guessing all the way to the very end. Also, you can discover exclusive Audible originals that you can't find anywhere else, and be the first to experience exciting new releases from your favorite authors. And if you're looking for a recommendation, maybe check out MrBallen Presents The Graphic Stories. I hear that's a pretty good graphic novel, and they do have a really amazing audiobook. Check that one out. Discover stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Your next great adventure awaits with Audible. Start listening today when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/MrBallen. Okay, back to the story.
Excuse me. Hospital rhythms.
In September of
The rhythm
1954,
of the
a
night.
14-year-old boy named Rich shuffled his way down the hallway of a children's hospital in England. He coughed and wheezed as he slowly walked down the hall next to other sick kids
That's all.
as they made their way towards the hospital's classroom. Now, Rich didn't know what kind of lesson he and the other kids were going to get today, but frankly, he didn't care. Anything was better than just sitting in his hospital room, bored out of his mind. So Rich was in the hospital because he was suffering from tuberculosis, which is an infectious lung disease. And over the past 10 weeks, he'd been bouncing around to different hospitals. And in fact, his condition was still so bad that this hospital had informed his parents that Rich might need to stay in the hospital for another 2 years. And as awful as this sounded to Rich,
Damn.
this actually was not the first time something like this had happened to him. When he was 6 years old, his appendix burst, and then he contracted an infection that left him in a coma for several weeks. And then when he came out of the coma, he had to recover in a hospital for nearly a year. And all this time in hospitals had really impacted Rich's life, in particular in terms of how far behind he had fallen in school. And because his family was not a well-off family, they couldn't afford to hire a tutor to kind of keep Rich up to speed. And so basically at this point, Rich's education consisted of, whatever random classes these hospitals he was staying in sporadically had. Whenever they hired a teacher to come in and teach basket weaving or, shop class, whatever was available, that was his education.
That's
so
awful.
that day when Rich walked into the hospital classroom, he did not have high expectations about what he would be taught that day. He figured it was just going to be some random class that he would sit through that at least was keeping him out of his hospital bedroom. But the instant he saw the teacher for the day and saw what was surrounding the teacher, he was really excited. Because all around the teacher were musical instruments. And Rich, as a kid, had always dreamed of playing the drum. He had seen one day in a Windows shop a drum set and he had wanted it so badly, but his family didn't have the money to pay for it, so he had never had a chance to do it. But now it seemed like Rich was finally going to get his chance. And so when the teacher
Hell
began
yeah.
handing out the instruments to the kids, Rich demanded that he get the drum set. He would not play anything else. And the teacher was like, okay. And so he was given the drum. And then that day, the teacher led the class, through a couple of basic songs, and Rich played the drum, and he and everybody else were objectively terrible, like the music was awful. But by the end of the class, Rich was totally revitalized here. I mean, he hadn't discovered some special new talent for playing the drums, but he had discovered that he had this amazing passion for playing the drum. It was like all he wanted to do now. And he figured that because he was going to be stuck in the hospital for the foreseeable future, he would just spend all of his time on practicing playing the drum. So the following day, Rich went into a closet in the hospital and he found these long sticks that were normally used for knitting, and they became his drumsticks. And for the next year and a half, Rich basically banged these makeshift drumsticks on anything he could to practice. And then also every few weeks, when the music teacher came back to the hospital, Rich would go to those classes and he would try to learn as much as he possibly could from the teacher. And that was basically his whole life, was those classes and banging on everything he could. Finally, in 1955, when Rich was 16 years old, he was released from the hospital. He was finally cured from tuberculosis. However, despite having his health back, it isn't like his life suddenly got a whole lot easier. It isn't like, he left the hospital and, magically became
Whole
this
new
amazing
slew
drummer and that
problems.
was his
Whole new
life.
slew
Instead, his family was really struggling financially, and so Rich couldn't go back to school. He basically had to get a job in a factory and work full-time just to help support his family. And for Rich, he felt like that was the right thing to do. He didn't resent his family. This is what his life was. And what he did is he found joy, while he was working in grabbing makeshift drumsticks and just banging on stuff any chance he could. And he figured that that would be his life. He would just work and, find joy in drumming whenever he could. But Rich's outlook on life changed dramatically on Christmas of 1956, so a year after he'd left the hospital. Because on that Christmas, Rich's stepfather had secretly saved up all this extra money by working all these extra shifts and doing whatever he could to finally buy Rich his own drum set. To this point, Rich had not been able to have his own drum set. Everything was makeshift. And so that Christmas, he gets this drum kit, and Rich is like, this is the best gift I've ever been given. And he began practicing even more. And pretty quickly, he began playing with local bands every time he had time off. And before long, he became known as like a guy in town who was like one of the best drummers. And then shortly after that, right, as Rich is kind of hitting his stride, being this kind of local celebrity, this local, very popular band fired their drummer. And so it made perfect sense that they approached Rich and said, hey, will you join our band? And Rich said, let's do it. By this point, Rich had become known by his stage name, Ringo Starr. And that band that recruited him was the Beatles.
Holy shit. I love these kinds of stories, man. I really do. I hope he does start doing like a little series of them. It'd be nice.
Around 11 a.m. on Sunday, October 20th, 1991, a 31-year-old man named Will woke up next to his wife in their home in Oakland, California.
Okay.
And the first thing Will noticed as soon as he was awake was the smell of smoke. Will got out of his bed and went to the window, and when he looked out, he could see there was this big plume of smoke coming from what looked like right outside of his neighborhood.
Oh.
And since he lived in California, where wildfires were unfortunately a common reality, he thought that's got to be a wildfire. So Will called 911 to report it, but the dispatcher told him that yes, that is a wildfire. It's on a mountainside, about 600 feet away from Will's house in his neighborhood. But they said the fire department was already all over it, and the smoke he was seeing was simply the leftover, after the fire had been put out. So no real threat here. And so after hearing this, Will's mind was put at ease. He thanked the dispatcher and hung up, and then he went about his normal morning routine. And as he brushed his teeth and took a shower, his mind began to wander towards work. So Will was a software developer, and he was in the middle of working on this video game about ants, like the insects, and how they go about building their homes. And Will was really excited about this game. But as Will left the bathroom and happened to look out the window, that he looked...
I love base building games. I like video games. Haven't got to play them as much as I've gotten older. Life gets in the way. But I've been able to play them a lot more here recently, and man, games are crazy. I love it.
Out before and saw that plume of smoke out on the mountainside, any thoughts of his video game immediately vanished, because now he was looking out and he saw this huge cloud of smoke that, in addition to being much bigger, there was also obvious flames licking up. Like, clearly the fire is not extinguished, and worse, it appeared the fire was moving in the direction of his neighborhood, and pretty quickly. And so Will immediately grabs the phone and he calls 911 again, and he reports that, hey, I'm seeing a fire here. And he could tell just from the dispatcher's voice that they were kind of surprised. They felt like the fire was under control. Like, what are you talking about? And so Will realized, like, based on this response, I can't afford to wait for help. I mean, it's unclear if they even know what's going on here, and this fire appears to be moving right towards me. And so after hanging up with the dispatcher, Will knew he had to act. And so Will runs to his wife, who by this point, she's looking out the window too. She's terrified. And they're like, what are we gonna do here? And they decide, we just gotta evacuate. Like, by this point, the fire is literally coming right towards them. The smoke is beginning to overwhelm them. And so they just grabbed a couple of bare necessities. They charged out of their house and they're looking down the street. And again, the smoke by this point is kind of, making it hard to see, but they can see other neighbors are frantically getting in their cars to evacuate as well. And Will and his wife, they're about to speed off when they remember their neighbors had gone away for the weekend and they had left their old parents to look after their 2-year-old kid. And they didn't have a car. And so Will's like, oh my gosh, he runs next door, he pounds on the door, and the grandparents, they come out and they're scared as well. They have the 2-year-old, and Will's like, come on. They grabbed a couple of necessities, they hopped in Will's car, and before long, all of them were peeling down the road, evacuating. 1 week later, Will returned to his neighborhood, this time in the passenger seat of a police cruiser, because you needed an official escort to be able to go into this area because of how dangerous it was. There was debris everywhere. When the police officer stopped in front of Will's address and Will got out, he looked at where his house used to be and it was just gone. like every other house in his neighborhood. It was completely leveled by this fire. That fire burned for 4 days, destroyed thousands of homes, including basically Will's entire neighborhood, and it killed 25 people. Will walked towards the rubble that used to be his home, and as he stood there surveying the area, he was hit with this epiphany. He didn't really care that he had lost all of his things, like everything he owned basically had been destroyed by this fire, but he just didn't care. Instead, all he cared about and all he was grateful for was his family. Like they had survived, they'd escaped the fire. That's what mattered. And so as he's standing there, sort of a little bit numb to what's happened here, he looked down and he saw ants. Now remember, he was developing this video game about ants, and so had done tons of research about ants. And he saw these ants that definitely were destroyed by this fire as much as the people were. I mean, their colonies were all burnt up and destroyed as well. But he saw these ants, and what they were doing was gathering supplies and rebuilding, brick by brick. That's what they were doing. That's what ants do. They simply go forward and rebuild, no matter the tragedy. And this gave Will an idea. 9 years later, Will finally released his video game. But it was not the game he had been developing, the one about ants. Instead, it was inspired by the ants he saw marching through the rubble after this horrible fire. In this game he made, you could create characters like avatars who could live entire digital lives, complete with homes and neighbors and spouses and kids and friends, like it really was an actual universe in this game. But this game is not set in a perfect fantasy world. Instead, the universe that these characters live inside of is meant to mimic the real world that we live in, where tragedies can strike, and often do, sort of unpredictably. Death, destruction, wildfires, you name it, that's just kind of part of living in this world. And so in this game, characters periodically would just have horrible things happen to them, and they would have to rebuild, just like the ants had to rebuild, and just like Will and his family and everybody else affected by that fire. You just have to move forward and rebuild. Will's game wound up being a massive success, selling tens of millions of copies worldwide, and today hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of people still play it. Will's full name was Will Wright, and the game he created was The Sims.
That's crazy, man.
In case you haven't heard yet, our newest graphic novel, MrBallen Presents Where Nightmares Live, is available for pre-order right now. It contains another 9 heart-stopping, strange, dark, and mysterious stories, all based on real events. This was a passion project. It took a lot of time, a lot of people involved, from the artwork to the storytelling. I mean, this is a beautiful piece to add to your collection, so you gotta check it out. The book comes out on September 30th, but again, you can pre-order your copy at book.ballenstudios.com, or you can click the link in the description below. There are a limited number of hand-signed copies available, but those are gonna sell out very quickly. So please pre-order today, because remember, your nightmares are waiting. Thank you so much for watching.
Motherfucker turned a horrendous tragedy into something amazing. Like, how many people out there get lost in The Sims? Like, it can be a very addicting game. Just how many people get lost in that reality of Sims as an escape. Like, think of how many people's lives has been changed because this dude lived through a tragedy, revamped everything, and made a game. Like, there's people out there that don't cope with the real world very well, and they love to dive into these kinds of worlds. And imagine how many lives he's saved, how many lives he's touched just from a video game, and all of it just because of some tragedy, man. Man, that's crazy. I love stories like this. They make me feel good on the inside. We all deserve to feel good on the inside every once in a while. Alright, I really enjoyed today's video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video as much as I did. If you did, please go down there and leave a thumbs up. It really does help the channel grow. While you're down there, if you want, going over and slap that subscribe button, become part of the Buff 1000 Nation. We do some crazy stuff. If you want to know when that crazy stuff happens, ding that bell and turn on all notifications. As always, be good to one another. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Damn, MrBallen, those were so good. Man, I forgot to do this.